I want to introduce you to Dr. Jerobeam Shaanika, who is the acting ambassador to the UN, to the United Nations. Dr. Shaanika has been in New York since 2010, and prior to this posting, he worked for the Americas, Caribbean, Africa, and Middle East Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Namibia. Previous to that, he was the head of the Cuban mission, and previous to that, the Namibian mission in France, and before that, London. Before joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he served as special assistant to the first president of the Republic of Namibia from 1990 to 1995. So it's a great honor that he's with us, so I thank him. I really appreciate it. I know this is perhaps not the easiest show to do a post-show afterwards, so doubly thank you so much for staying. I would just like to really start by asking you, could you sort of paint a picture of what the current state of Namibia is? What does Windhoek, the capital, look like right now?
Thank you very much. I must thank you for your patience to remain behind. I know it is always a spoiler to say that you had this fantastic show. Now you have me talking. I'm not sure that I will do a good job like the actors. If I may describe the state of Namibia, Namibia is a country that attained independence in 1990 on the 21st of March. After a long history of colonialism, as it was depicted here, and if you can see the chronology on the wall, said it all, the journey that we traveled. From the 21st of March, 1990, Namibia became a republic, which is a sovereign, secular, democratic, and unitary state founded on the principle of democracy, rule of law, and justice for all. The power of the state is vested in the people of Namibia, who exercise their sovereignty through the democratic institution of state. We have three branches of state. That is the judiciary, legislative, and executive. You asked me about Windhoek. Windhoek is the capital of Namibia, and it's almost a reflection of our colonial past. Because if you go to Namibia, you'll find the building that are still a reflection of that German heritage. It's not a big city like New York. It's small, but it's unique in its own way. The infrastructure are quite modern. If you go to Windhoek, some part of Windhoek, you might think that you are in some city in Europe. But then if also, when you go to the others, you find that it's a city still where most of the majority of people live, that have been not well to do economically because of the legacy of the colonialism.
I'd like to speak a bit about, sort of delve into this relationship of Namibia to Germany, since our playwright, Jackie Sibless-Drury, really writes about this history. I'm wondering, what is Namibia's relationship to Germany now?
Well, Namibia and Germany, they have a good diplomatic relation, and which of course started when you got our independence. The relationship, there is diplomatic relations, that's country to country. We all maintain diplomatic mission in both capitals. Then, of course, we have relation between civil societies and, of course, people to people. We still have a population that is still want to come to terms with what was portrayed here. as you know, the colonial war, the German war that started in 1904, left a bitter legacy. 80% of the German population, which is figuratively says about 65,000, were wiped out. So as 50% of the number were also perished as a result of this genocide. They have tried to pay reparation from the Germans, but of course the response from the German was it's always not being straightforward. Behind the door, they are saying, well, we are already giving a lot of development aid to Namibia, and of course they are trying to say that when these things happened, the international law, humanitarian law, did not exist then, which is not really, it's quite an excuse. But of course, it's only them who knows the real reason behind it. But one can only say that they are just trying to escape the responsibility. Although they have accepted the moral responsibility.
And does that idea of reparations, is that still in the news? Does that?
Yes, it's still in the news, and the people are still persist that Germany must pay reparation. And then, of course, the Namibian government is trying to engage the German government, but they are quite evasive on this issue.
Well, there's a moment in the play when one of the actors speaks about the difference between the Holocaust in Germany and the Herero Holocaust, and says, in Germany, the Jews are written down line by line and documented. When we spoke earlier, you were telling me about something called the Blue Book that was recently discovered in an archive in London. Can you speak a bit about that? Because I think that is a sort of interesting parallel.
Well, before I go to the Blue Book, I think maybe let me just address this issue of the comparison between the Jewish and the heroes. I mean, we are talking in terms of different cultures. I think the Jews who were in Europe then, they had almost all their names and system, they were systematically documented. And when you're talking to our culture, we did not really have documents that when you were born, your name is written down, you have a birth certificate. Sometimes this thing did not exist in those days. So therefore, it is very difficult to find a documented or documentation with the names and so on. We are talking of 1904. This is the time when we were still a colony. These people, they were a colony. They were not an independent, or they didn't have they were not integrated in the system. So they were still regarded as natives. So I think that comparison, there's a big difference. So now coming to the Blue Book, this Blue Book is actually a book that was written by it was almost the account of the German treatment of the what they call the natives, the black population, and the book was ordered. The publication of the book was ordered by the British government. That was in 1918. Why they used the Blue Book expression was used in those days because any report published and distributed by British Parliament was called the Blue Book. Now, this Blue Book was destroyed in 1926 South African government together with the British. That was apparently a kind of a reconciliation gesture when they wanted now to rehabilitate the Germans. So it was more like a reconciliation type. And they wanted to hide this atrocity, so the book was destroyed. And of course, likely you cannot destroy everything. So some copy were discovered.
And what if the Herero people today, they're still...
Well, the Herero people, they are part and parcel of Namibia. As I say, Namibia is made up of different tribes and different people. We have people of German origin who are still there. We have people of the English. You still find a sizable number of the British English people. We have Africans, those who are mainly from South Africa then. Then we have Hereros, we have Namas, we have Damaras, we have Bambos, we have Kabangos, and so many others. But you see, these are identities that, because you have come from this tribe, but all of us, we regard ourselves as Namibians. We are all equal before the law. The Constitution made us, to grant us that equality, and no one is above any other person. So, and all of us, when we travel outside Namibia, we all carry the passport of Namibia. Nobody is identified as a Bambo, as a hero, or whatever. So they are just people, Namibian people, like any other people in Namibia.
And during the extermination order, I believe that many of the Herero fled to other countries, to Botswana.
Yes, most of them they fled to Botswana because the area where this incident happened was very much close to the border with Botswana. So they crossed to Botswana. You still have, up to this day, the offspring of the heroes that left, that crossed over to Botswana. They are still living in Botswana up to this day. But some of them, they were brought back and they were integrated in Namibia.
I want to open this up to questions, but I just had one more question for the ambassador before we take a few questions from the audience. I was wondering if there's other pieces of literature or art that has come out of Namibia that addresses this particular topic of the genocide that you know of.
Well, I know of there's many people like Professor Peter Katavi has written the history of Namibia, where he mentioned this incident. There is also one politician, his name was Dr. Klaus Dierpis. He was a deputy minister, but now he passed away. He also had a kind of an archive where he has documented a lot of the history of Namibia, chronology almost from when Namibia became a German protectorate until independence. Then there are also others who have written, like Ian Thompson. He wrote a book on Kaiser's Holocaust, the Germans forgotten genocide. And there's also David Olusonga and Caspar Eriksen. They also wrote The Colonial Roots of Namibia. But there are many other books. There's also one written by a German called Let Us Die Fighting.
So non-fiction, really?
No, these are accounts of what happened.
Okay,
But they're non-fiction.
So nothing sort of from a literary aspect or a fictional or visual art?
No, I can't recall any, but I'm not saying that there's none, but so far, these are the ones that I know. There are many others.
Well, I don't want to hold anyone. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to take a couple questions from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
I believe that there's a national holiday around the genocide called Heroes Day.
Yes.
And we were lucky enough when we were in Namibia to be there when the celebration was going on, and but it was all in Oshivamo, so
Yes.
we couldn't understand it. But there was one particular part where the participants would fill their mouths with water and then spit it out at people.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could say something about it.
Yes, thank you very much. There is a date which is remembered, which is connected to that. I think it's the 25th of August. The Heroes Day is the 26th of August. But now this one, it is for all the heroes. But on that particular day is the day of the launching of the armed struggle for the independence of Namibia. But it's not just a celebration of the armed struggle, but it's also a celebration of all other acts of heroic activity that have been carried out throughout Namibia. And the ceremony that we are talking about, it happened in Okahanja, where the graves of the traditional chiefs of Hereros are buried. So usually on that day, the offspring goes to the graves and they do certain rituals where somebody will take water from the cup and then sprinkle to people around. That is the ceremony that we are talking about.
Thank you.
It's sort of an amazing epilogue to this play to consider that Namibia got its independence in 1990, and Dr. Shaanika was working for the first president in 1990. Anything else? Any other questions?
Just a comment. I was there about 9 years ago, and the country has done so well given the burden of apartheid. When we talk about Germans here, the South Africans cut the legs out from the country during apartheid. It was given to South Africa as a protectorate, and South Africa inflicted apartheid on the country. So there's the University of Namibia, there's been great things, but 10 years ago we could still feel the effects of apartheid. I say people were so gracious, beyond any graciousness I could find in myself, given the history of oppression. So it's quite a place to experience.
Thank you very much. I think maybe just to add to what you are saying, one of the legacies of the play that you have just shown, because it's depicting the genocide, is that it's a loss of land, and which is we have not yet recovered, even after independence, because people were pushed out of their land, and they were pushed to what they used to call native reserves, where they were squeezed. If you go to the north, for example, you find people have no place even where to graze their cattle. But if you were to drive you have been in Window, if you were to go to the central part, you find large hectares of land, commercial farms. I recall when I was working with the first president, Sam Nujoma, there was a drought of 1992, and I used to accompany him in helicopters when we surveyed the areas. Sometimes we find people grazing along the road corridors, but on both sides of the roads, There are farms with tall grasses where it will even disappear. But then because when we got independence, there was what we called 1992 principles that were part of negotiation of the constitutions. They call them constitutional principles, that the properties that were in the hands of the owners cannot be taken. And then if you are to acquire the lands, you do it on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. But now, the difficulty is that now, even when you want to buy this land on the willing buyer, willing sellers, either the sellers are not willing, or in the case where they are willing, they put up the price high in such a way that it will be difficult to afford. So these are the difficulties that we are still dealing with.
Questions?
I think you wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah, just based on what you said, I have 3 or 4 questions, so I'm just editing which one's
The best one.
The last one?
The best one.
Oh, God. At the moment, is there a national theater or any type of performative outlet in your country?
Yes, there is. There is a National Theatre of Namibia. I'm sure even if you go to search and you will just enter National Theatre of Namibia, you will get all the information.
And are there any plays, or you said there was a non-fiction account as a reference, but are there any companies there to bring forth their scope of what happened in Herrera?
I'm sure you know how the theatre whole world work. They go according, it has to do with the actors. If they want to play, they have to choose themselves. I don't think anybody has to impose a play into the actors. They have to decide which one they want. I'm not saying that they are not willing or it doesn't exist, but I'm just saying that I am not aware of any of this.
Of any creation, historical work, or exploration?
Yeah. But I believe they might have been, because I have spent a lot of years out of the country. It might have happened during my absence. So I cannot really talk with certainty that it doesn't. Just that I'm not. I can't recall.
Well, I'm just wondering what the temperature is in the culture to explore. Are people in a state right now where they don't want to go back there, or they're not in a place to explore the past?
No, they do.
No, they do.
They do explore. If you go to in television, they have some slots where they talk of the history, where they talk of culture, where they talk of even theatrical play and so on. It's almost, the world today is integrated. What you do here in the United States, the people do copy in other countries, or vice versa.
So
we live in the global village.
The themes of the genocide are discussed in the open.
Yeah, they are discussed. Yeah. They are discussed. Sometimes you even have radio calls in where people discuss this issue. A year ago, the skulls of prisoners that as they were just demonstrating in the play, there were people who were killed in the German prisons, or who have died as a result of disease and so on. Their heads were cut off, and these heads were transported to Germany for scientific research. One of them was that the scientists were trying to demonstrate that the blacks are inferior when it comes to whites. these skulls were taken to Germany, and last year they were brought back. And during that time, there was a lot of discussion about these particular issues. And I must say it's a quite an emotional issue in Namibia, especially this genocide. If I had to bring, I'm not a hero person, but I regard myself as just as a hero person because they are our people who were killed during this genocide. So the discussion is that sometimes they can turn out to be emotional, if I can put it that way.
I believe we've had Herrera that have come to see this production in New York. Maybe one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I actually agree with all kind of things.
Okay.
Well, I was curious as to why the Herrera tribe versus the other ones. And also, if I can get two questions in, if there's any tension or fighting or threats to the people of Namibia today, whether it be like within, tribe to tribe or just any other.
Or you mean that if there are conflict between the tribes of Herero against other tribes? There is much tribal conflict per se. I mean, for one thing is that there is a rule of law. And most of the stereotyping outlawed by law. So you cannot go publicly to call somebody or to castigate somebody because of his tribal background. That can be punishable by law because the Constitution does not allow discrimination. But I'm not saying that there are no individuals, just like even here, you find people here who can say certain things and they can hide behind the freedom of speech. So, of course, there are incidents of individual incidents, but it's also depends on who does certain things. But if it was to be somebody high up, then that person has to be made to toe the line. But there is not really very much conflict which can be regarded as tribal conflicts. We hadn't had any fight among the tribes like what I have witnessed somewhere elsewhere in the world. There's a harmonious relationship. But of course, like in any other country, you can find sometimes argument that can maybe turn tense. I think that's how I can describe it. But conflict, I can't think of any. There are emotional issues. As I can say, land issue, for example. There are people who feel that if our land were taken, why should we buy it back? Why can't we just take it by force? But then the law does not allow that. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I want to end on a slightly lighter note, if I may. Dr. Shaanika turned to me right before the show started and told me a wonderful phrase about history, a Namibian phrase.
No.
I'd love for you to repeat it.
No, I was just saying, I didn't say it's Namibian, I just said that in one of the, when we were growing up, we always told that the hunters always tell the story. But the lion didn't get a chance to come and tell their own story. So I'm sure if one day lions will come and acquire the speech like we do and tell their story, it will be quite different. And I'm sure that's now, as we witness here, that most of the accounts that are written, either they are one-sided, either because these people were exterminated and they cannot come back and tell their own story. But as we say, the account and even the skull that returned from Germany, it's one way of these people who were killed in the most brutal way to tell their own story, because we see it with our own eyes and then we go to the records and see what has happened. That's the way to say maybe they are telling their own story. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe one day the lions will come back and tell their own stories.
Well, Dr. Shaanika, it's a huge honor for Soho Rep to have you here. We're so thankful of you giving us our time. Thank you so much, and thank you, audience, for staying. Thank you.